Good evening and welcome to the first of two Inside Government shows for the spring 2025 season. This is our last Inside Government shows for the spring 2025. We'll be back on Thursday with the school forum, but this is a show that's on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, as well as the college's radio station, Win 89.1. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. On Tuesday, May 20th, voters across New York State will be able to go to the polls to vote for their members of the school board, but they'll also get to vote in almost all cases, except for the big 5 school districts, on school budgets. Auburn is no different, and they also have a referendum on the ballot to do some emergency spending with an HVAC system. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There is no state budget officially as we tape on Tuesday afternoon. Pieces have trickled out from the governor's announcement last night at a press conference. Among that is that some school aid will go up. Auburn may or may not know. We'll ask in a few minutes. We'll also know about some policy changes that are being made in Albany, but again, Auburn and other school districts may not know. But we're going to ask a lot of questions for both the superintendent of schools, Dr. Misty Slavic, who is here back in the studio again. Thanks for being here in your maroon. And Tessa Crawford, who is the business manager for the school district and joins us every April and May to, if it wasn't you, it was Lisa Green, to give us an update. So, welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So it has been a busy and I would guess hard couple of months for you on the budget front. So where are you today as we tape on the 29th in the budget process?
I'll let Tessa take over on that one.
So we just approved the recommended budget on the 23rd, and then on the 13th we'll have our public vote for that. And
13th for a public vote on
May 13th so the public preview at
because the vote's on May
board.
20th.
Right, so
okay.
then the vote was on May 20th.
Okay.
Thank you.
So is the budget up or down from last year? And we'll get into the specifics, but is it up or down?
It's up 2.8% from 24-25. So from the school year, next year we're budgeting 2.8% increase.
How much is that total roughly?
So that's about $3 million.
Okay. And do you know, well, let's go back to Albany. You had earmarked a specific amount when you started this process back in November. But in January, the governor gave you a number. So what number did she put in her budget for you?
So she put about $61 million in for Auburn. So that would have been a 7% increase in foundation aid, but with all of the cost aids, it actually netted to 1%. So we had a decrease in almost every category. A lot of the cost aids, you have to spend money to get the money. You don't get 100% of it back, but so sometimes we can predict when we're going to go up or down. The foundation aid does include a new formula that helps us as we know the last over 10 years we had worked on the foundation aid formula to make it more realistic to Auburn.
So is that part of the budget or has that been passed separately?
So that's still part of the budget. So it needs to
be approved by the legislature.
So everything needs to be approved still.
And we should say, as we're talking about this right now, the process is the legislature gets printed bills, and this could take more days. But hopefully, at least by May 13th, you'll have some numbers. So with that being said, again, it's been 20 hours. Do you have any indication from Albany if you're getting more aid, or are they just not releasing those numbers yet?
So those numbers have not been released yet. Usually we're used to receiving at least the amount in the executive proposal, but with the proposed budget. But with this year having that foundation aid formula change, if that part doesn't pass, there's really a big decrease for Auburn, which we're a little nervous about. So,
okay. So let's be positive for a second, though I wouldn't be if I was you. But let's be positive that they're going to give you more aid than what you put in your January draft. Your current budget has a 3.25 tax levy increase. Would that reduce the tax levy increase if you get those numbers, or is that that is going to be borne into this budget one way or the other?
No, so that would remain the same. I mean, the timing is so impeccable, and so last year the budget, New York State budget, had passed April 20th, so we had confirmed numbers. This year, obviously, it's coming so late that we are still leaning at that 3.25%, doing the best that we can plan.
So let's go back to January when you started planning, and this is always my favorite Lisa Green question, your predecessor. What was your gap when you started the year between revenues, what you expected as revenues, and expenses? So
the gap that we're starting with, it was about like $4 million.
Okay.
And that still is with, so a lot of our, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but so to come out with a 2.8% increase from this year to next year, I think everybody was very pleasantly surprised in the sense of it was very obvious a lot of the hard work that we went to cut the costs that were needed, knowing that those increased costs are coming for those student services that we'll probably get a little bit more into, that Misty can talk about. But so when we looked at that 2.8% and then looking at that gap and knowing that we did have some fund balance to use, we're feeling like we can plan ahead and work on this, and just look at different avenues of how to plan for this unknown budget that's coming on with all these different variables which could be good but might also be very bad, and then still make sure that we're planning ahead for all of the big things that we need to do within our school district.
So let's talk about what's in your draft before we come back. We'll come back to the state and we'll come back to fund balance and out. So what is new? Are there new positions in the budget?
We have a .5 music teacher that would be assigned to the high school to extend our music program. We added the music production program this past year. Extreme success. Our kids loved it to the point where we were maxed out and had a waiting list for students to get into the program. So those students are now moving on. They need the second half. They need the next coinciding course. So that .5 music teacher would enable us to add that additional class. We also are adding about 5 special education classes to the district.
So are those mandated, or are those just
they would be
needed?
mandated if you look at the continuum of services. So if we offer a K-2 course or a class for kids, those kids are now aging out, so we have to move a class and add a class for those grades, say 3 to 5, but we still have kindergartners coming in who need the class. So we're still going to fill the class we already have, but we need to extend that continuum of services to provide the next level for those students who are aging out.
Any other additions to the budget?
I'm trying to think if that was it. We had basic special education was the big one. Summer school used to be paid out of our ESSER funding from during COVID, our COVID funding.
What's SR?
That's
The COVID funds.
the COVID funds.
So let me ask you about the COVID funds, because
Yep.
this is before you were both in your
Sure.
You've been on just about
7
9 months,
months.
7 months, okay,
Yeah.
and you've been on a year and a half, roughly. So some decisions were made before you both
Sure.
were part of the leadership team right now. There were questions that were asked previously of all governments, whether it's the college, whether it's the county, whether it's the city, whether it's the school district, towns, villages. You got a lot of COVID money, and in the case of the district, you added positions. As that money runs out, how will those positions be funded?
So as of last year, we rolled in all of the positions.
So they're just part of the
funds,
budget.
Yeah, so the COVID funds went through till September of this school year. But we had gone into it knowing that we were going to keep that. And I think last year it ended up being a total of 17 positions that were the final positions that we had from the COVID funds. And so we rolled them into our budget.
So for process-wise, as we go through this, you need 50% plus 1 vote to pass a budget, correct?
Correct.
Are you using any of your current fund balance in this budget?
In the 25-26 school year?
Yes. Yes, for the new,
Yes, for the new budget.
year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are about, $2 million
So it's-
to balance, and
Yeah.
then $2 million in construction?
So there's a total of 3.6 million. Just for the emergency project, it's a total of 7.2 million that we're paying from fund balance. So
how large is your fund balance right now?
So right now, our fund balance is about 14.8 million, but then we're planning to take 3.6 of that to use for the emergency fund. So that's that
This is
portion.
the HVA
Yes.
system. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. Okay, so I want to go back to the fund balance. So if you're using roughly 50% of your fund balance, you can't sustain that by using 2 or 3 million a year. Am I correct?
Right. So eventually, it's going to run out. So it seems like it's a lot right now. But remember that we had gone so long without being funded to what our district really needed that we finally received those funds. So there was the influx of that. And then with COVID, it took some time to make sure that we could do some long-term planning for that.
But you're within the 13, 14% of a fund balance that this state's okay with your number?
No, so you're supposed to be at 4% max.
So you're way high.
Yes.
Yes, but so after this budget, this proposed budget that we have, we're going to be closer to 8%, and the board's ready for a couple conversations to make sure that we will be using that up to go right back into our community and so that we can finally be up to par with where we need with our buildings, student.
But this is
curriculum.
all based on the premise that you're getting a formula change and you're getting more state aid.
Yes.
Well, it is.
But we aren't expecting a huge bump in state aid. We really aren't. I mean, it's
Okay.
really just a moving of lines for where that money is. Like they tell you that they're giving you money for certain things, but they're taking it from other things. So it's
Yeah, and I don't think the state has said how much they've increased state aid. Did
Right,
they give
I
that
don't-
number? I
I
don't
don't
know that
know
I saw that in the last.
there's a total number for
Yeah, I think that they had like the total dollar number,
I
but
know that
not
for
broken down per
municipalities,
district.
it was about 50 million, which is not going to be good news for our next two guests
No.
from the city, because they've got a budget
Yeah.
gap as well. You also have in this budget $500,000 in tax certiorari resources. Okay, back up the bus for a second. What is that to start with?
Yeah, so we started the year with about $2 million in our tax certiorari reserves. So what that is when we have homes or business owners who are in litigation with assessments, once those litigations end, if that judge allows that person to go back like $3 million on their assessment for the last 3 years, we would have to pay that person back. So we work so we review all of those litigations and make sure that we're at least prepared if it were to be worst case scenario, we would have that money and it wouldn't be
So
coming
how
out
much
of-
do you have in the fund right now?
So right now we have the 2 million. We just closed 4 litigations.
Did you win?
I mean, it was way less than I thought, so now we can
Okay.
use 500,000 and put
Okay.
that into the general fund.
Okay. So that's not something that necessarily gets replenished all the time.
No, we look at that. Each reserve balance is reviewed and needs
So
to
this
be
is a one-time
justified.
only for this year right now at that.
Right. So we
Unless you
know.
have judgments, other cases.
Right. Yeah. So 1.5 million is a pretty safe balance right now with all of the other ones that we have, with all of the other litigations that are out there. But it's every year we look at that. And we
So
predict.
what have you heard on the foundation? First of all, what is foundation aid for those who may not have watched this show for 20 years and we've been talking about it for 21 years?
Yeah, foundation aid is what the state calls that portion that they set aside for each school district. So it's based on enrollment, it's based on demographics. I mean, sometimes it's just, there's no rhyme or reason to it. So
So did the governor in the January proposal, I know you said it's like moving lines. You might win one category, but you lose in another. Was foundation aid itself as a line item increased for Auburn?
yes, so that was increased 7%, but then we have things like building aid and BOCES aid, excess cost aid. All of those had decreased, so we netted at a little less than 1%.
All right, so let's assume that you're going to stay flat, you're going to be at 3.25. How much does that raise, by the way?
So that's about 1.1 million.
And you're about half a percentage point under the mandated state
The
tax.
max. Yeah.
I know it's 2%, but there's a lot of other figures that go into this, as we've explained, and the state gives you a number often that is not 2%.
Right.
It is, and in your case, it's 3.74%?
7, 8.
7,
Yeah.
8, okay. So with that being the case, why did you say that far under the tax cap so that you wouldn't have to use more fund balance, for example, or the tax cert funds? What was the board's determination this is the right number?
They really debated for quite some time, I want to say even since back in November, of what would be appropriate. It's a very hard balance between, we understand that our community, we're seeing increases in costs for just daily living. So it was really that debate of back and forth of how much do we raise it, but then with not knowing what the budget's going to be, they didn't want to go to the max, but they didn't want to go to the minimum because we're trying to be safe and fiscally responsible. So that was the general number that they came up with.
Okay. And just all before you got here and before you moved to the state of New York, there were budgets that went to mid-August,
Right.
where they didn't
Yeah.
approve it. But that's when they start taking their pay away, and that got added. So,
Happens in Pennsylvania too.
okay, so there's a couple of things here now. Let's talk, so that we know there's some specifics in the budget, though you may not know. When you were last here, I think we talked about the cell phone ban.
Yes.
What is Auburn's policy?
So we have a K-12, no cell phones out during the day. And it's pretty much the same as the governor's, bell to bell is pretty much how we were. Anytime they're in school, they shouldn't have their cell phone out.
So do you think that, and again, I'm assuming you don't know the details of what's in the...
Only what everyone else knows.
Okay, so it's only what you, like Will Rogers, you only
Right.
know what you read in the newspapers.
Right.
So do you think there will be changes, or did she propose changes that would add a cost to a place such as Auburn?
Only if she makes the change of a requirement for a storage area for cell phones. Right now, we just have our students put them away, not have them out, so they could be in their lockers, in their pockets. So
in that particular case, do you think that would be a cost borne by the state, or do you think that'll just trickle down to you?
There is the proposal out there, I've read in the papers, that she is proposing some funding to help schools, but I don't know if that, unless she demands that we have a storage location for them, that would be the only cost that we would incur.
So the other piece that I read about an hour ago before we came down here in the New York Post is that she's also mandating free school lunch across the board. It sounds like, or that's part of the budget deal. And again, this is all based on unattributed sources for a process that's still ongoing. What does Auburn do when it comes to free lunch?
We already have free lunch across the board.
So you don't see, now, do you think that if there's money budgeted that you might get some reimbursement?
So we currently do. So the school meals are not in the general fund. They're in their own fund because the school meal process is self-sustaining. So currently, New York State gives us a reimbursement, and then USDA gives a reimbursement. So because of our demographics, we're allowed to offer free meals and get reimbursed from those municipalities for that. But with that offer, with what the governor was proposing for the free meals, and with the cell phone ban, that was like in January when she had proposed that. It was great knowing that we could just walk in and say, hey, everyone, we're already doing that. Like, we're ahead of this. So it was kind of a proud proposal when she said that, because there wouldn't be a cost to us, I mean, unless there's the storage units. But it did sound like she was offering some sort of funding for that.
So you mentioned January. So today, on the 29th, is the 100th day of a new administration. And obviously, Albany is not reacting well to that. I don't know if you have any words. We mentioned special education. We have other programs locally. Have you seen anything trickle down so far that the administration is sending a message that you may not get money, not necessarily for, hopefully it's not from 24-25, let alone 25-26, but beyond that? Is there any worry on your horizon of any particular program that you get federal money now for that we might not have?
There has there's been rumors and things that come across, but nothing concrete. I mean, right now, we're just watching closely to see how we're impacted, and we're really just focusing on making sure that our students and our teachers have everything they need on a daily basis.
So in special education, because you're talking about the 5 that you were talking about, is that something that comes from the state of New York, they give you reimbursement, or is that stuff that comes from Washington to Albany to Auburn, or is that something that Auburn just comes up with?
For the requirements for having the
Yes.
courses, that's a mix of IDEA and state requirements for special education funding. So, but that's the requirements. Just if a student has, an IEP and they need special services to access their curriculum, that would be where that's coming from. So it's a requirement.
So let's go to the more recent item that you've put on the agenda, and this, I was calling it a bond vote. It's not. It's a referendum for $7.2 million for what?
We had installed at all of our elementary buildings a new, it's an easier comment to say HVAC system, but it's part of that system to provide cooling and heating, controlled cooling and heating in our classrooms. Since the installation of those new, pieces of equipment, they found that there is some faulty equipment involved, and our staff has worked diligently to try to resolve those issues, but they just cannot be resolved at this point, so we need to replace them.
When were they installed?
Oh, that was before my time. I want to say about a year ago.
Everything's beyond.
I know.
You've only been here
I
7
want to
months.
say it was last year, over the course of a couple of years.
So isn't there a warranty?
I don't know about a warranty, but we are in litigation right now because, we're trying to get that money back, get them fixed or get the money back is really where we're at. So we're at the mediation stage. So, but until we can go through, that's a lengthy process. So until then, we have recognized that we have to get these replaced because we need to have adequate control of the cooling and heating in our classrooms.
So this is not a bond issue. Normally,
No, it's not.
Normally on a project of this size, you would go out for a bond issue.
Yeah.
So why aren't you going out for a bond issue?
We talked to our financial analysts, our, Dr. Timms and Associates, and they did a thorough investigation of our financial status and found that going out for bond right now may hurt us in the future if we need some major construction projects, which we do in the future.
Okay.
So it was better for us to take a portion of that funding out of our fund balance and out of our reserves.
And this is covering all of the elementary schools except for Seward. Why is Seward not in the mix?
I don't believe that Seward received the newer equipment,
Okay.
so it was just the way that it was financed.
So the other piece to this is usually you go to the state of New York and you have a construction project, and I'm not going to come up with the right number, but they usually give you 80 cents or 85%, 85 or 90 cents on the dollar. You're not doing that in this case, correct?
I don't believe we can on this one.
So through the emergency project, they are able to aid it over 10 years, but it's ours is 80%. So
why
again,
not
another
wait?
one.
We need to get them fixed
Yeah.
now, because right now we have no control. They're freezing up and then melting and flooding classrooms. So it's a direct impact on our instruction.
Yeah, that's why the state they worked with us to ensure that we could declare this an emergency project so that it did make sense in the long term. It wasn't going to
But it
hurt us
doesn't
in our
get state
building aid.
reimbursement in any way,
Well,
shape, or form.
no, we get the building aid. So, and I'm sorry, I meant we get aided over 10 years. So that was partly with our long-term planning. We worked.
So part of this $6 million, you'll get aid on it
Yeah.
over time?
Yep.
So you're really spending about 1.2 or $2 million overall for a 7.2. That's what's confusing here. And if I'm confused, I'm thinking other people might be confused as
Yeah, it is
well.
confusing. It is.
So where is the money going to come from in the short term?
Our fund balance and in our capital project reserve.
And there are 2 different funds.
Wow.
Yep, so one is the unrestricted and one is the restricted. So we have a capital project reserve that we kept fueling because, as a way to take that burden off of the taxpayers. We want to make sure we're saving and we're planning for our big projects that we have that obviously are very costly. We had enough in our capital reserve where we could take some from there, but then recognizing that we did have that influx in fund balance, that we want to use it. it made sense to take half from there and half from restriction.
And that'll reduce your fund balance to about 7
Yep.
by the time it's
And then not have to burden the taxpayers.
Okay, so finally, a budget process for here on out. So you had said, this is going before the board when?
It was already approved by the board.
Okay, so what are they voting on? There's a public hearing on the 13th. What is,
It's
and we're not even going to get into why it doesn't make sense.
Yes, it
but
doesn't. It is backwards. It is very backwards.
So what will be done on the 13th, other than people will tell you you're increasing taxes too high, other governments are doing the same thing, and it's just too much of a burden? I've just given you the summary.
Right. It's a chance for the board to, to present the budget, for us to present the budget and answer any questions that any of the community members have before the budget vote on May 20th.
And then on May 20th, the public gets the vote. So I guess I will ask you this question. You do have, the next guests who are coming in here in a moment have a $2.8 million shortfall.
Yes.
And they're going to talk about how they're going to close their gap. They may go over the tax cap. There's a lot of different plans. They, though, don't have to go to the public.
Correct.
The county legislature increased taxes and the levy back in December. Seymour Library had an increase in the fall. Any concerns that this is the one place that voters can have a say?
Absolutely. I think that they're concerned. And, the city budget is where it is. And our budget's the only one they really have the ability to take some action on, other than going to meetings and expressing their concerns. So I think that it is concerning for us, but we need to really focus on what's in the best interest of our students moving forward and our community as a whole. We're supporting the future of our community. So
let's go through the negatives about this. What happens if the budget fails?
If the budget fails, we go back to how we were financed this current year, so in the 24-25 school year.
So you automatically go back to that, but the board can make tweaks and put something else before the public, but you're not at that. I know you're not.
Right.
So last time the budget failed, I don't even think you were with the district then. That was 10 years ago?
No, I wasn't even. At least.
I think it was a little longer than that.
Was it? Okay, so we've gone through this. So if you go to a contingency budget, it's based on numbers for this current year. Are there other cuts that are made, though, automatically in a contingency, like busing and?
So it would just be some of the admin. So it would be a decrease of about $3 million if we had to go to a contingency budget.
Okay. But hopefully you won't need to go back to the budget. So I want to ask you just real quickly, you have 3 board members who are all up, Danielle Woods, James Van Arsdale, and Dan Lovell, correct?
Correct.
All 3 are running?
Yes.
Are there, they have about 26 hours, as we're taping this today,
Okay.
to put their petitions. So I'm not going to ask you what I normally would ask a superintendent, what qualities do you want? But they have until tomorrow night to submit their petitions. Do we have other candidates running?
Yes, we have 2 more.
And then I know there's a whole issue with Ian Phillips, the former board president, was sworn in last week. Is he only staying on the board until the election?
Yes.
And the board has made the determination that the 4th place winner, they've had a vote on this, the 4th place winner will
take on that role.
Okay, so of those 5 people,
4 of them will move forward.
okay, unless there's a write-in or something of that nature. Polls are open from when to when?
7 to 9.
Yeah.
And
7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay, and all the same places?
Yes.
So wherever you voted before?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I know Casey, Seward, junior high, and where's the 4th place?
Casey Seward, junior high. It's not Genesee, is it?
Is it the Board of Education, or you don't vote
No,
there?
we
No.
don't vote there.
Okay. All right, well,
It doesn't make any sense for
on
them.
Thursday, we will tell people where they can
Yes.
vote.
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank you both.
Yes, thank you for having
There's a
us.
lot of unknowns right now. You're going to be campaigning a lot about this budget in the next couple of weeks. But our guests have been the superintendent of schools, who's been on the job for 7 months. Nice way to get started, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks.
Misty Slawick, and we have Tessa Crawford, who is the business manager. And we want to thank you for being here. Did you have
you.
something to add? No?
Oh, I was
Okay.
trying to think.
Okay. So you can go to the polls on May 20th to vote on the Auburn Enlarged school budget, as well as the referendum in regards to the HVAC system, and then also for 4 of 5 candidates running for the school board. We'll be back on Thursday with those candidates, with 4 of those candidates here in the studio. There might be others that have filed their petitions by then, but they had a deadline of Sunday night at 5 o'clock to respond to us so we could plan. We'll be back in just a moment with the second and final Inside Government for the spring 2025 season. It is with City Manager Jeff Dygert, as well as Mary Beth Leeson, the Comptroller for the City of Auburn, to talk about their budget, which also has a gap in it. And then we will be back on Thursday with our Auburn Large School District Forum. Robert Harding will be asking the questions. I will be moderating. So all the questions that come forward are from Robert Harding. I'm Guy Cosby here for Community College. Stick around for Jeff Dygert and Mary Beth Leeson in just a moment.